I recently happened upon an isekai that I thought had a relatively original premise. It's still a help, I got stuck in a video game. But hey, instead of being an MMORPG, or a world with RPG mechanics, or something else mildly RPG related, it's an otome game. For those not familiar with otome games, they're visual novels where the player plays a self-insert Mary Sue character who has a bunch of beautiful boys all fall in love with her, and then through a set of choices you get to choose which beautiful Bishonen you date. So, very far from a standard RPG. Also, as a bonus, our protagonist in this story is reborn not as the game's heroine, but the Villainess. I was excited to share, and started talking to my wife about it, but her response was, that's been done so many times before. Apparently, this premise has been used quite a bit in manhwa. That being said, it's still new to me, so ladies and gentlemen, today I'm excited to present my review of My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom. My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, or as I'll be calling it for the rest of the review, Bakarina, starts out the way pretty much all isekai start out. Our protagonist becomes a bit too intimate with Truck-kun and gets reincarnated in a fantasy world. In this case, our protagonist, Katarina, is reborn as the daughter of a duke, and one day, after hitting her head on a rock, she suddenly remembers all her memories from her past life, realizes she's been reborn as a villainess in an otome game she was playing, and the villainess she just so happens to be reborn as dies at the end of almost every route, regardless of whether you got a good ending or a bad ending. Her response to this realization is to write down everything that she remembers from the game, and then come up with a plan to avoid all the various ways she could die. Some make a fair amount of sense, like getting better at sword fighting and magic. Others, like her practicing making and throwing fake snakes, show she can be a bit dense. Anyways, none of her efforts really matter here, because what really saves her from all the bad ends is being a decent person. With one or two exceptions, all the love interests had crap childhoods, so our protagonist, by being kind to each of them, generates herself an instant harem. Oh, and her harem isn't limited to the guys either. She also manages to get the heroine from the original game and both rival characters to also fall for her, by, being decent enough to show some empathy. Anyways, after that, we get a romantic comedy, with Katarina being oblivious to all other characters' affection because this is a harem story, and as such, she, as the heroine, is contractually obligated to be oblivious. Also, there's some drama too, which so far has been composed solely of kidnappings and rescues, repeatedly. In the first 5 volumes, 3 different characters have been kidnapped so far, and the 2 volumes that didn't have kidnappings didn't have a central conflict. Bakarina works first and foremost because of Katarina's likability. Katarina can be absurdly dense and oblivious to social cues, which would normally be incredibly annoying. Somehow though, she manages to be dense in a way that's endearing. Her straightforward attitude contrasts nicely with all the plotting of the nobles around her. Also, she has a tendency to do what most of us would want to do in any given situation, but wouldn't have the guts to. There's a bunch of delicious food spread out in front of her at a ball? Hell yes, she's going to have some, as much as she can eat. Who cares about looking elegant? Despite being a noble lady, she'll climb trees, plant veggies, and go fishing, generally just ignoring all societal conventions. Normally, when you think of a wish fulfillment character in an isekai context, the wish being granted is being good at everything and silly overpowered. In Katarina's case, she's a wish fulfillment character in the I really wish I could act like that sense, and I love the heck out of her for it. I also love the mini councils she has in her head, with 3 different Katarinas. Those are hilarious, and that nicely segues into a discussion of this series' humor. A lot of the funny moments in this series are derived from squabbles between the characters pursuing Katarina's affection, which is par for the course for reverse harems. That being said, this story executes on this brand of humor rather well. Also, we have female love interests as well as male ones for our lovely heroine, so things play out slightly differently than usual. Finally, this series is just relaxing to read. You know nothing really bad is going to happen to any of the characters, and everything is just so wholesome. For some strange reason, I've been feeling a bit stressed out recently, and reading this has just let me forget all of my worries for a while. My main gripe with Bakarina is the repetition. You see, the author has a tendency to retell the same scene from the perspective first of Katerina and then one of the other characters. To be clear, I think this concept can work really well if the retelling causes the reader to view the scene in a new light or adds something substantial. Unfortunately, I would say that this happens in Bakarina at best 50% of the time. The other half, it's just presenting information that the reader could easily infer. I mean, yes, we know Katerina's dense, and hence, there's some degree of unreliability in her narration, but please, trust in our ability as readers to read between the lines. We don't need another character's perspective to just state the obvious. The worst is that all the dialogue is repeated word for word in most of the retellings. The author could have easily avoided that and made those sections of the story a heck of a lot less tedious as a result. Another complaint I would level at this series is that none of the characters in Katerina's harem are developed enough or likable enough that I feel like cheering for them. I care about Katerina and I hope she finds true love, but honestly, the author hasn't given me any reason to believe that any of the current romantic interests are the right person for her. I mean, yes, I know they're all really pretty and talented, fundamentally good people. They start out with decent enough building blocks of personalities to form great relationships with Katerina. Apart from when they're first introduced though, we barely see any growth of any of their characters, or their relationships with Katerina. I think the main problem is there's just too many members of the harem that are introduced too quickly. At current count, she has 9 members of her harem, 6 of which were introduced in the first volume, and there just isn't enough space in any given volume to both develop relationships with that many characters and still have a cohesive plot. The first volume of the story managed it essentially by just introducing characters and doing nothing else. And the 4th volume was great because it only included half the harem. I really do hope that the author lays off introducing any new harem members in the volumes ahead so we can get to properly know the ones she's already introduced. My thoughts on Bakarina are somewhat mixed. I definitely found some parts of the story were tedious, but others gave me plenty of laughter. For the 5 volumes that have been translated into English at the time of this recording, I found that the author's writing absolutely improves from volume to volume, and I have high hopes for this series going forward. I recommend reading a bit of the first volume, and if you like Katerina's character, then you'll probably enjoy the series. If you've already read this and are looking for something similar, I would recommend Ascendance of a Bookworm, another isekai with an occasionally silly but really awesome female lead. Anyways, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the review. Cheers!